Welcome, Dave Armstrong here, chatting with Matt Holland. Matt, thanks for taking the time to talk to me today. It's an absolute pleasure. As a man from Dublin, I can remember a couple of your goals quite well. Most definitely.
Some good memories playing for the boys in green.
Yeah.
Obviously, the one against Cameroon stands out, and the goal against Portugal in qualifying as well. So there's some good memories.
Yeah. We'll start with your youth career. You grew up in Bury. What was it like growing up in Bury in the early 90s in regards to kind of football?
Yeah, I'm a bit older than that, so I was. I actually moved south. I'm trying to think, 83. So it was sort of late 70s that I grew up in Bury. It was fine. I was at school actually, funnily enough, with the two Neville brothers. They were a little bit younger than me. Gary was a year below, and Phil again a few years below him as well. But football was always a passion, and my dad played every Saturday. I used to go and watch him from the moment I could walk, really. Go and stand on the touchline and kick a ball about from the age of 3. And so football's always been my number one priority, really, growing up. And that continued when I moved south. My dad moved south with his job, and we moved down to a place called Sawbridgeworth in Hertfordshire in 1983.
And who was it that who did you grab the attention of at Arsenal for youth level?
Well, so I actually my first sort of professional club that I was involved with was Southampton. They had like a satellite centre in Harlow, and I was just playing local football. And the scout was there on the touchline. Spoke to my dad, would he be interested in coming? So I joined Southampton. Actually, I had a week's training down at Southampton, and they made me a mascot for the first team. I was probably 9 or 10 years of age, and they're obviously trying to get me to sign at that time. But I did sign, and I was in their centre of excellence for a couple of years before Arsenal did get in touch. And same thing, really. I was playing for a representative side, I think a League 11, and Scout was on the touchline. Steve Rowley was his name, actually. He became the head scout at Arsenal. And he spoke to my dad and asked if I'd be interested in going to Arsenal. And so I decided to make that transition from Southampton to Arsenal at probably, 13, something like that.
And the whole thing about being too small at Arsenal, that's something that's, been said about some of the world's best players, most notably Lionel Messi. It must be really daunting for a young lad to come into football and then be told, no, you're too small.
Well, I think that was a kind way. I think when someone tells you you're too small, it's a kind way of saying you're not really for us, or you're not quite up to the standard required. I think if you're going to let down a 13-year-old, 14-year-old child, it's easy to say you're too small rather than you're not quite good enough. And I think that was more the case, to be honest. Obviously it was a very strong setup at Arsenal, and maybe I wasn't quite ready. Well, they obviously felt that anyway. So I went back and played my Sunday football, played my representative football, continued playing for the county, was playing for Essex, and Frank Lampard Senior, actually. So Frank Lampard's dad, who used to play for West Ham himself, he was on the touchline, and again, another game, and spoke to my dad after the game. Would like to come to West Ham, come and train with us, come and play a couple of games. Did that, and ended up signing for them.
And what did you, when you moved to West Ham, what was your kind of the key thing that you learned in regards to football? Because obviously teams have different ways and styles of playing. What was the one thing that you took away from West Ham? You were there for 3 seasons. You unfortunately didn't make any appearances, but you must have learned quite a bit, under West Ham at that time.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good learning ground. I mean, there's a good reputation at West Ham for developing young players and coaching young players and bringing them through into the first team. As you say, I didn't quite make the grade. I was travelling with the squad on loads of occasions. Virtually a whole season, I was in the squad, but never quite made it. But it was a good breeding ground, good experience. I think there's this West Ham way, if you like, and certainly they did like to play and wanted to pass the ball. I think back to some of the players that were coming through at that particular time. Joe Cole, Michael Carrick, Frank Lampard, Rio Ferdinand, all a little bit younger than me, but they were all coming through at the same time. And so that reputation for West Ham's sort of academy, if you like, was still very prevalent at that time.
And then once you applied your trade at West Ham. The bid came in from Bournemouth. What was your initial thoughts when they came in for you?
Well, I'd been on loan to Farnborough in the conference,
Yeah.
and Harry Redknapp was quite a big advocate of getting young players out on loan, go and experience first team football and sort of grow up, really, if you like, and go and get kicked, because down the leagues that's exactly what happens. So I did that. That was good experience. Played 6 months for them, and then I was getting to the stage where I was sort of looking for the next step, really, and the next step was first team football in the league, and I sort of went to Harry, and there was a number of clubs actually who sort of came in and asked if they could sign me, but Harry, being an ex-Bournemouth manager, he sort of pushed me in that direction. Said that Bournemouth would be a good move for me. They actually were in a terrible state when I joined, initially on loan, and it became known as the Great Escape that first season that we were there, because I think at Christmas, I joined in the January, and at Christmas they had about 9 points, and were miles away from safety. But we had a really good second half of the season, a very good young team that Mel Machin had assembled, and a lot of young players like myself, really, who'd maybe not quite made the grade at Tottenham, West Ham, clubs like that, really. And he did assemble a really good unit, a good camaraderie, and a good team. And we managed to stay up that year. Then in the summer, I went back to West Ham and sort of spoke to Harry, and having conversations. And he said he wanted me to stay, offered me a contract to stay, but he was honest and said that I was down the pecking order. I wasn't going to be first replacement to get into the first team. Had some good players at the time. West Ham in that midfield. Ian Bishop was another one, actually. He was in the first team at West Ham, who'd come from Bournemouth. So it was going to be tough for me to break in. I decided I needed to be playing regular football, and being in the reserves again for another season wasn't really for me. So I decided to make the move, and I'd enjoyed my spell there on loan, and I got on and had a good relationship with the manager, Mel Machin, and so it felt like the right move at the right time. And I had 2 really good seasons down there.
And it really did kind of kickstart your career at Bournemouth. I mean, 104 games, 18 goals, but probably the most notable was the Player of the Year award. That must have meant an awful lot to you as a footballer. It really must have cemented that you made the right move to Bournemouth.
Yeah, obviously it's always nice to be recognised, by the supporters, and I felt like I'd had a good season because that was my first year that I was there, and it went well. So yeah, as I say, on a personal level, it was the right move at the right time, and it was good to develop myself. And maybe I wasn't ready at the age of 20 to jump into West Ham's first team, but I always had confidence that I was. I think you have to have a bit of that as well, that belief in your own ability that you can make it to the top level, and also you get a bit of resilience as well, because when people tell you you're not quite good enough, it can easily knock you, and you can sort of go into your shell and not recover. And I think that's something I always say, actually, to young players. Everyone's going to get a knockback at some stage in their career. Someone's going to tell you you're not quite good enough. Someone's going to tell you you're not for them. But the best way to respond to that is go out and show them that actually, you are a decent player. Yeah. And I think, that's how I saw my move to Bournemouth, really. Yeah. It was almost a case of not a stepping stone, because at the time, I felt it was a great move for me, but I always had the ambitions to get back to the top level if that was possible.
Yeah, that's actually a message I take myself. Obviously, I'm just starting out in commentary and broadcasting, so that's one thing. There's always going to be knockbacks. I've been told by a few people,
Well, people are quick to criticise. People are quick to sort of, especially on social media, it can be, it can be upsetting at times. It can hurt you, but I think the key thing is that you believe in what you're doing. You listen to the right people, and you have the right mental strength and character to bounce back from it.
Yeah, and with Bournemouth, you were made the team captain. It's, the biggest honour you can have of being at the club. But that obviously helped get you to probably your most significant spell in your career at Ipswich. When you made that switch, did I have that feeling of this is the right move at the right time?
Yeah, I mean, I was only too aware, really, of the history and heritage of Ipswich Town. And when George Burley sort of came down to Bournemouth, actually, I was given permission to speak to them. He came down to meet me at a hotel right on the seafront, actually, at Bournemouth, and we sat at a couple of hours, and just listening to him and talk about the club and what the ambitions were for the club, it was a no-brainer for me, really. Apparently, I'd come to his attention playing for West Ham reserves, funnily enough. He was a manager at Colchester before Ipswich, and I'd actually played against him a couple of times in the reserves against Colchester. So apparently that's where he first saw me. Then he watched me regularly at Bournemouth, and eventually, he came down to Bournemouth and tried to sign me. And as I say, when I knew it was Ipswich and I knew about the history of the club, and listened to the way George wanted to play football, and saw what he, or listened to what he wanted me to be a part of, I just felt it was too good an opportunity to turn down.
And you came in there, and it was almost a repetition of Bournemouth. You're given the Player of the Year, but your first goal against obviously a loss to Stoke, but nonetheless, your first goal for Ipswich must have been really special.
Yeah, it was good. I'd actually started the season because when I signed for Ipswich, George sort of said he wanted to play a back three. He wanted to play me in the middle of the back three. I'd played at the back for Bournemouth, similar to the way that Steve Sedgwick had done the previous season. Steve Sedgwick had been sold in the summer, and he saw me sort of taking his place, and at times changing from a back three to a back four and pushing me into midfield. Well, I'd played at the back in that back three for the first sort of 8, 9, 10 games, and then he put me in midfield in that game against Stoke. We were behind in the game, I scored, and I think that he kept me in midfield for the following game against Torquay, and I scored twice in midweek as well. And that was it then. I think I'd sort of changed his mind really on my best position. I always felt as a central midfielder. And obviously I was happy to do whatever the manager wanted, and if he saw me as playing as centre back, that was absolutely fine. But I personally felt I was better in midfield, where I could use my energy more. And as I say, scored a couple of goals, against Torquay and the game against Stoke at the weekend, and that probably changed his mind. But it was, it's always good to get off the mark, really, especially when I saw myself as someone who liked to get in the box and get the odd goal here and there as well. It was good to get off the mark.
And you, at your time at Ipswich, it was kind of if you don't succeed, try again when it came to the playoffs. You had such a good run with Ipswich, but been knocked out by I think it was it Charlton the first time in the playoffs. You made it to the playoffs, but you just missed out on the automatic places.
Yeah. Well, they'd missed out the season that just before I arrived in the playoffs. Then it was Charlton, that you're right, that first season. Then Bolton the following year, and eventually we managed to get to a final. At the fourth time of asking, my third time at the club, and obviously beat Barnsley to get into the Premier League. But it was, you're right, it was a few knockbacks along the way. I said you got to respond to knockbacks and take the hits, because generally over the course of a career you do get more lows than you get highs. You have some good moments, of course you do, but every time you have a defeat, it hurts. It ruins your weekend, it ruins your week until the next game comes along, and generally you do have more lows, and we did have to respond to a few setbacks. And actually the season we went up, we missed out on automatic promotion on the last day of the season as well. We had a good chance. Man City were losing 1-0 after about an hour, and we were winning. And then Man City ran riot and they ended up winning 4-1. But for a period we were actually going up automatically, so we had to do it the hard way even that year. And
getting to the Premiership, before we talk about that, you had some characters on that Ipswich team when you went up in your years there. But Tony Mowbray is probably one that speaks out to me. Obviously, he managed Hibs up here. He's quite, the Hibs fans are very, very fond of Tony Mowbray. What was he like as a character to play with and to be in that squad?
Well, he was brilliant, and I always say he was the sort of, when I first moved to Ipswich, he was the person I turned to for advice because of his experience, because of his knowledge, because of the way he held himself, and the reputation he had in the game. He was the person that I turned to for any advice. If I had something that I felt wasn't going quite right, or needed to do something, or just pick his brains at times, he was the person I turned to. So awful lot of time for him. Now he's doing a good job at Blackburn now. He's got Mark Venus alongside him, who was a teammate at Ipswich at the time as well, and they're doing a terrific job at Blackburn. But he's a brilliant guy, and got an awful lot of time for him. And as I say, he was a big part of the club when I arrived, but also a big part of my career, because he was always someone I could bend his ear, and I trusted his opinion, so he was a good person to turn to.
almost like a big brother kind of figure when you were at Ipswich. Getting to the Premier League, finally making it there. Did it give you that real feeling of accomplishment when you finally got back to the Premier League and can play at that top level?
I think it's everyone's ambition, isn't it, to play at the highest level you possibly can. And I always had that ambition to get back to the Premier League or get to the Premier League at some stage in my career. And I didn't sort of get there the easy way, if you like. I had to sort of drop down a few leagues and spells on loan, and obviously moving to Ipswich, and then eventually getting over the line. It was a really good moment for me, and one that was nice to be able to share with my family and my dad especially, really, because he was someone who growing up was a big influence on me, took me here, there and everywhere, and played a big part in my career. So just to be able to share that with him and sort of look at each other after the game and say, we did it. It was a good feeling.
And being in the Ipswich first team for all those years, then you must have had some crazy stories. I know people ask you all the time, but what are the stories that stand out to you kind of over the course of your time at Ipswich?
Crikey, it's always difficult to answer those types of questions. Automatically you think to the ones that you can't really broadcast. There was plenty of characters. Honestly, we had some real laughs. It was funny because it was 20 years actually. Back in May now, to the day that we got promoted, and I organised a Zoom meeting as we are now. With all the players who were involved on that day at Wembley. The majority were there anyway. And it was brilliant. Just honestly, we had 2 hours just talking over some of the stories, some of the things that happened, some of the characters in the dressing room. And it's difficult for me to sort of say too much, and I don't want to sort of break anyone's confidence.
No, of course not.
But as I say, I think it's important when to have a successful team that you have a group of lads who pull together and get on, and that's exactly what we had at Ipswich. We had a lot of characters, we had a lot of captains, we had a lot of leaders in that dressing room, a lot of big voices, but we all got on, and I think that is crucial to any team being successful.
And I mean, that camaraderie is so important to building a successful team, and the fact that you're all back together for the anniversary, it speaks volumes. But the fifth place finish, the highest finish that Ipswich have had in the Premier League, must have been astronomical to know that European football was coming to Ipswich.
Yeah, that was brilliant. I mean, obviously, the expectation was that we'd struggle to survive. Every team that gets promoted via the playoffs is automatically favourite to go down the next season. So people probably wrote us off. We didn't make too many signings in the summer. I think you need a little bit of help, but we hadn't made too many signings in the summer either. But we got on a roll. I mean, first game of the season, we got a bit of a rude awakening. We played Tottenham, went a goal ahead and ended up losing the game 3-1. And you just realise then that making a mistake is going to get punished. The following game, we drew at home to Man United, and that was the game really that we thought, what, we might be okay here. It gave us a lot of confidence, and we had some big results that season. We won at Leeds, we won at Liverpool, won at Everton. Some really good performances. And we played some good stuff along the way, and so I think in the end we had a chance on the last day of the season to qualify for the Champions League and just missed out.
And it's a crazy thing to think. A lot of people would say Ipswich in Europe. Surely that didn't happen. People always think of Ipswich as unfortunately as a championship club, but they've been in the top tier for quite a lot of the time. Yeah,
although it's a long time since we were back in the Premier League. That spell there was the last time. And at the moment, struggling a little bit in League One as well. That's just obviously been finished now, the season. And I think I read yesterday it's the lowest position for 67 years. But they'll be back. Absolutely, things go in cycles, and I've got every faith that Ipswich should be back at some point. Might be a while, but at some point.
No, I've no doubt that they'll get back to where they belong. But playing in Europe, how difficult was that at the time? Obviously, you're stepping up to, again, like you said, a whole new level of football, because you don't know what to expect with some European clubs. Yeah,
I think looking back, obviously the European experience was a great one, and it was an enjoyable one. But I think we probably maybe took our eye a little bit off the Premier League And first season in the Premier League was the focus. The next season we'd done well in the Premier League. Right, we're in Europe, UEFA Cup, and maybe our focus went towards the UEFA Cup a little bit more, because obviously we struggled in the league, and that's the big disappointment really from my entire time at Ipswich that year. A number of us didn't play quite as well as we had done previously. There was a couple of players came in on big money, which maybe upset a little bit the dressing room. The European experience, playing Thursday, travelling back, playing on a Sunday, that didn't help us. But at the same time, we had some good experiences in Europe as well. So it's a sort of double-edged sword, really. But that season would, that relegation season would have been my hardest one, really, at the club.
Yeah. And I mean, it happens to clubs, doesn't it? You look at Burnley, they finished so high, they got into the Europa League, and unfortunately, like you said, the league suffered. But I mean, it is when you get carried away. When you make your Europa League or Champions League football, you do get carried away because you want to do well in Europe. You want to be known as one of the top teams, and sometimes the league can suffer. But you stuck with Ipswich. I mean, you had an offer from Aston Villa, and what was your thoughts on turning that one down? Obviously, you had an allegiance to Ipswich.
Yeah, it was difficult, obviously, because, as I say, we wanted to play Premier League football, and I was tempted by the Villa move. There's no question about that. I had a 4-year deal at Ipswich left when we went down, and Villa only offered me a 3-year deal, and the money would have gone down in the third year because I would have turned 30, and so there was I spoke to Graham Taylor, who was brilliant. And he just said that his chairman wouldn't budge. He said, there's not a lot else I can do. He said, I'd love to offer you a 4-year deal, and I'd love to, get you to the club. He said, but my chairman won't budge on that. He's got this thing about players turning 30, and doesn't want to give, extended deals to someone who will be turning 30 in the middle of that contract. So that unfortunately put paid to the move. Having said that, I still felt, like you say, an allegiance to Ipswich and a willingness to get Ipswich back into the Premier League as well. And I wanted to, and I did want that year as well to try and get the club back up to the top league again.
Yeah. And in between all of this with Ipswich was your international career, which is a privilege of mine to be able to ask you about this, because obviously, being from Dublin, a massive Boys in Green fan. But when was it you were first approached by Mick McCarthy to represent Ireland?
Probably approached sort of, I think in 98, 99, so first or second year at Ipswich. He phoned me at home and said that there was a B international coming up, and would I be interested in playing, heard I was available. Mm-hmm. And my reaction, first of all, was, is it really him? Because that's the usual thing. It's one of your mates messing about. It's one of your mates messing about. Yeah. Of course it is. Then the more you got talking, it was actually, no, it's definitely him. And actually,
it's the accent, isn't it? It's very, Mario, you could play for me.
Exactly. Good name, McCarthy. So it clicked. It's definitely him, and I had no hesitation. It was absolutely what I wanted to do, and it worked out brilliantly. I played that B international, and then got called up to the squad, and ended up sort of staying in it really from 99 onwards.
Yeah. And being in your first international game, you, like many players before you, I'll never forget the famous comment from Mark Lawrenson saying he played for Liverpool, went over on the boat, played against Poland, national anthem started playing, he kind of chuffed him and I don't know what it is, I'm just gonna play on. Was that a similar situation of just gonna keep my head up? It's always a tough one when you have players that come from England to play for Ireland. It's always one of those things, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, first game actually it didn't go to plan because it was a Macedonia game, which we you remember. I came on as a sub. Yeah, came on as a sub and conceded a late equaliser. So it was a pretty I don't know, a mad experience really, that first game, and then. Really, it was a trip to America in the US Cup after we got promoted in 2000 that really sort of cemented my place in the squad. There was a lot of people pulled out because it was the end of the season, and it was a couple of friends at the end of the season, and it gave an opportunity for a few of us really to show Mick what we could do. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I had a good couple of games really, and So yeah, but it was honestly the biggest honour really, and so proud really to have played for Ireland.
And the qualifying campaign for the World Cup in 2002 was not kind. For on paper, you look at it and say, "Oh God, right, it's going to be another playoff again."
Well, yeah.
But ultimately, you went into it. Ireland had a young squad. You had Robbie Keane, yourself, Damien Duff. You coming through. It was exciting football we were playing. But that goal against Portugal in the Stadium of Light must have been something fierce.
Yeah, first international goal as well, and again, come on at sub at half time. It was 0-0, and we hadn't really had a kick. And Mick sort of said at half time that he needed to sort of get extra body in midfield. I think he might take Niall Quinn off up front. I'm not sure. And just wanted to get an extra body in midfield. Asked me to sort of sit in front of the back four and just sort of keep an eye on Figo. That was quite easy to do, wasn't it? Cheers. And so anyway, we ended up going a goal behind after 50 odd minutes. And we sort of clawed our way back a bit, and I ventured forward and picked the ball up I remember picking it off Roy, and it sort of just opening up really. No one came towards me, and you're sort of looking and thinking, well, I'm thinking, should I cross it? And then there's no one coming. I'll take it another step forward, and all of a sudden it just opened up, and I thought, I'm 25 yards out, have a crack. And well, it hit the back of the net, and wow, you lose yourself, don't you, for a moment. And then Mick actually, when the whistle blew, he came over, put his arm around my shoulders and said, "I told you not to leave the back four." And I thought, oh my God. And then he started laughing and said, "I'm glad you did, though." So yeah, it's a typical Mick comment really. But it was a great moment scoring your first goal, and especially in a big one like that against Portugal.
And in that campaign, I mean, you want to talk about running away like a lunatic, you only have to ask Jason McAteer against Holland. But again, that qualifying campaign was absolutely special because it was probably the best one we'd had since 1990. But how did it feel to finally get there when that whistle went in Iran, and you're potentially going to a World Cup?
Yeah, amazing. I mean, we indebted really to Shea over the two games against Iran. I thought he made some big saves at home as well, Lansdowne Road, and away from home as well. We're actually probably more comfortable away from home. We probably restricted them to less chances away from home than we did at home. But we got the lead at home, and obviously they scored very late on, but it was literally the last kick of the game. So it didn't matter. But that was an unbelievable moment. Yeah, when celebrations that night were pretty spectacular, and it was quite intimidating atmosphere as well when we were inside the stadiums. A lot of people there and a lot of noise, and the crowd had been there, 100,000 of them before the game, sort of 3 or 4 hours, and praying. And I remember there being problems with the female members of the FAI not being able to get into the ground because they said there's no women allowed in the ground.
That's right. Yeah.
There's all sorts of things going on, so it was quite a big atmosphere. But we did it, and we had some good celebrations.
And obviously the preparations for the World Cup, and again, this is one thing I refuse to talk about with Saipan, and I really do. I don't like to dwell on that because it's not what I want to remember the competition for. But with Roy going home, obviously an opportunity, silver lining and all, kind of came up for yourself to step into the team, and again in midfield show what you can do. And I mean, regardless of what happened in between Mick and Roy and Saipan, that must have been a real tick in the head to say, right now, here's my chance to really get on the world stage.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's never nice when that type of thing happens, and we lost a world class player from the squad.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There's no two ways about it, and
your captain.
Yeah, the one player that would have, if you'd have asked any other international manager, who would you have at the Ireland team in your side, they'd have all picked Roy. At that particular time. So, so it was a big blow to lose him, no doubt. I actually thought I was probably in pole position to play alongside him to start. Anyway. Yeah. And I'd been given the number 8 squad number, so the indications were that I was going to be playing alongside Roy. So I ended up, obviously playing alongside Mark Kinsler, and we got on well anyway off the field. We with good relationship. I played against him a number of times for Ipswich against Charlton, and he was one of the ones who kept saying, "Come and play for us, Ireland," when we'd play matches, and so he was brilliant, and we got on brilliantly. And I think we did all right in Roy's absence. So it never nice to lose someone of his quality, but between us, I think we did okay.
Yeah. And that cohesion's so important, especially when it's on the pitch as well, and you know so much about each other. But the goal against Cameroon, again, 25 yards out, have a crack, as you said, and the noise that came from that stadium, the amount of fans that had travelled over must have been euphoric.
Amazing. Honestly, I dreamed to play in a World Cup and then to score as well. What do you do? It's like, wow, you just can't quite explain, and trying to put it into words is very difficult. It was special, absolutely special. It's weird because when you were so far away from home, you don't necessarily get the feeling of what it's like back in Ireland, and so you don't necessarily get that feel. But honestly, the amount of fans that turned up, everywhere we turned, it was Irish fans. It was just incredible, and the support we got out there. Well, the support the Irish teams get, full stop, is phenomenal. Nothing short of phenomenal. And my dad, my wife, and boys in the crowd, to be able to share it with them again, it was another great moment. And as soon as I hit it, I thought this has got a chance. And when it hits the net, you just lose yourself.
You cut across it so well. I remember getting up at 6 a.m. I think my mother woke me up, threw me on the couch with a duvet, and turned on the TV and said, "There you go." Because I said, "Wake me up, I don't want to miss this." But I think it might have been I was about 12 at the time. But I remember that goal going in, and I lost it. My mum came running down the stairs saying, "What's happened? What's happened?" I said, "We scored, we equalised against Cameroon." But no, it was a special memory for me as well. I'm sure thousands upon thousands of other Irish fans. But the Saudi Arabia game and the goal against Germany, Mick McCarthy's celebration alone, you must look back at that and laugh. I mean, I mean, you don't think about it at the time, but seeing it back, it's amazing, isn't it? Everyone's reactions to different things, and he's sort of looking, is it in, is it not in, and all of it. Robbie does manage to sneak it in the near post, but there's some just great memories really from the whole tournament, but also tinged with a little bit of what if, what might have been, because I thought we were a better side against Spain. Oh, easy.
And, we deserved to go through, and then you think, well, what might have happened? Because we drew with Germany, and they got to the final. So there's always that little bit of you that thinks what might have happened. And
if you had went through against Spain, you would have got South Korea, and God knows what would have happened. But it was a fantastic experience for all involved. But after that, making the transition from, unfortunately, Mick left the Irish setup, which I was devastated. I think a lot of people were. But what was the main difference between Mick and Brian? Brian Kerr coming in and taking over. I mean, obviously he was at youth level a massive success. But what was the big difference between the two?
I don't know really. I mean, obviously Brian had a great reputation, and the good thing with it was that he knew a lot of the players as well, because they'd been through the system. And so when he came into the first team management, he knew like Damien Duff and Robbie, who'd been successful at underage level as well with Ireland. I don't know really. I mean, everyone's got their own little way of doing things and do things slightly differently, but generally, we're all the same. We're all got the same common goal, and we're all after 3 points and winning games. And so most managers have got their little quirks and got their little things that they do differently. Yeah. But there's that common goal of wanting to win games.
And I mean, the international career kind of came to an end then. I think Steve Staunton tried to convince you to come back to Ireland after that, but that wasn't really happening, was it? That was just you made your decision and you stuck with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably I maybe wish that I had carried on at that time, but I'd sort of become a bit more of a peripheral figure, and I wasn't playing as much, and there was a few younger ones coming through, and obviously wanted to extend my career as long as I possibly could. So looking back, I don't have too many regrets, but maybe I should have carried on really.
And just before we finish off with Charlton, a friend of mine asked the question of, did it disappoint you not to get to 50 caps for Ireland? Was that a little bit of a niggler at the back of your head?
That would have been nice. Yeah, there's always like little landmarks that you'd like to tick off, and got quite close, but not close enough. Yeah.
And your final club was Charlton. Again, quite a good experience. Charlton's a fantastic team. But everyone's heard the Paolo Di Canio pasta story. I actually heard it for the first time in an interview a couple of weeks ago, and it really did make me laugh. But how did you find your time at Charlton overall?
Yeah, brilliant. Actually, again, another really good club. I was very fortunate through my career really to play for clubs that very friendly. Community-based, community-centered football clubs with the fans at heart, and the supporters were great, and the teammates were brilliant as well. It was a really good setup, and we had some good times there. We finished 7th in the Premier League with Charlton. We had a season where we were in the Champions League places for a period, and unfortunately Scott Parker went in the January. He went to Chelsea, and that was a big blow to us in trying to reach the top 4, but eventually finished 7th. So we had some good moments there as well. As I say, played with some great players, some good memories. Beat Chelsea on Boxing Day 4-2. That was a big day for us.
Very famous one, yeah. It was a very famous victory, that one.
Yeah, so we had some big scalps, and we punched above our weight, people would say, for a period. But we had some good players as well.
And you're obviously not done. You may not be playing games, but you keep yourself involved through TalkSport and RTE and everything like that. But all the best for the future, Matt. I know we're just running a bit low on time, and thanks a million again for taking the time out to speak to me. It's been an absolute pleasure. No,
it's a pleasure of mine. Thanks very much for having me on, and I wish you good luck with your broadcasting career.
Thank you very much. And any tips you can give me, just fire them over. You never know what might
Just be yourself. Just be yourself.
That's the plan.
Don't listen to what other people tell you, because they'll only be negative anyway.
I'm still finding my voice. Don't worry, I'll get there.
Good man.
Thanks a million, Matt, and all the best.
Pleasure.